No, no, I can't look. Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate you guys stopping by, taking a look at my stuff real quick. I have the Wesley So versus Fabiano Caruana round 4 game for you guys. It is a very exciting game, very roller coaster game. There's a lot of meat and potatoes in this game. So I really am glad to be presenting it. So, for all of my people in the Philippines, magandang umaga, kamusta na, mabuting pagbati, ingat lagi, mabuhay, maraming salamat po sa nanonood ng aking video. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. Yeah, that's it, because Fabiano Caruana is from the United States, so that's English. So if you guys are ready to go, let's jump in and hop into this game. Now, one thing I will mention, the thing that's really interesting is the picture that you guys see and the thumbnail that you guys clicked on, it actually shows Wesley So playing the move C4. And I thought that was really super cool because this game, C4 is played. So it's almost like that's the picture from the tournament, which it isn't. This picture is from like 4 years ago. But anyway, if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look, see what we have for this game. All right, so we got C4, like I said. So we start off with in English. We got E5, G3, knight comes to F6. We got bishop to G2. We have bishop to C5, D3, C6. We have knight comes to F3. So what we have here is we have the English opening, the King's English variation. Now, as you guys are familiar with like Kings, when you see a King's, you know, you see like the King's Indian and stuff like that. The King, yeah. The King's Indian. Yeah, the King's Indian defense and attack, yes. So as you guys can see, you know, you have the bishop to G2, you have the knight to F3. So you have the King's type of, you know, attack defense, however you want to call it. So we do see D6 by black. We have castles by white, castles by black. Knight comes to C3. We have A5. You know, we don't want to really see any A2 or A3, B4 situations knocking this bishop, because we really like where the bishop is. You know, we'll see if it's relevant at some point. We got D4 coming. Pawn takes D4. Knight takes D4. And then we have A4, which is the novelty of the game. As you guys always hear me say, when you have like multiple knight moves, multiple bishop moves, you usually get into a novelty pretty quickly. And it's the same with pawns. You don't always see a pawn, you know, get moved and then get moved a second time, especially before all these pieces get developed and stuff like that. So, we do see the novelty of the game here. We got rook to B1. We have rook to E8. We got E3. Queen comes to A5. We see bishop to D2. We got bishop down to G4. And then we do see F3 in the game. And I actually was a little bit curious for F3 because Wesley So is a really big Catalan player. The move that's most suggested in the position is actually queen coming to C2. And I just kind of thought, as a Catalan player myself, that is just such a natural move to play. You know, I was just kind of thinking maybe he might toss that out. But he did, like I said, he did play F3. So we got F3 on the board. We got bishop back to H5. We see knight over to E4. And of course, this is discovering an attack on the queen on A5. So something has to give. So the queen comes to D8. We see knight taking C5, pawn taking C5. We see knight down to E2. And then we see queen to D3. Which looks really good. It looks really cramping for white. But white does have knight to F4. And as you can see, now the queen does have to move. But we are snapping a pawn off here on C4. We see B3, pawn takes B3, pawn takes B3. We see queen to B5. We see E4. Now, something I want you guys to notice is white is down a pawn here. But it's not the best pawn for black to be up, because as you guys can see, you know, we do kind of have some issues with our structure over here, and we are not completely developed as black. So as you can see, white is completely developed. They just kind of need to move their queen somewhere, and they're all the way done. But white actually is in more of a position to start attacking black. So, you know, they do have it, you know, what we like to call an initiative in the position. So a lot of the times when you can get the initiative, that is worth a pawn. So we do see bishop come into G6. We got bishop to C3. We have knight to A6. And then we have H4. And H4 is very interesting. Because if you are not careful, you will get your bishop trapped. So let's say, for example, you know, we don't recognize. So what we saw in the game was h5 because black recognized that, you know, there was an attack, you know, coming. But if we don't, let's say we just play kind of like a lazy move. Let's say we play like knight to c7 or something, like not paying attention to the king side at all. We would actually see bishop takes f6, pawn would take f6, and then we see h5. And as you guys can see, the bishop is trapped. So if you're not careful, it doesn't look like it could get trapped because that square looks like it's, you know, it's pretty held down, but you know, it's not as secure as it seems. But like I said, we did see h5 stops that attack altogether. We see queen to c1, king coming to h7. We see rook to d1, rook a to d8. We have queen to b2. So as you can see, like, you know, black and white both kind of have their pieces rolling. You know, white is definitely throwing some, you know, some attacks down, some threats and stuff down. We got c4, bishop takes f6, pawn takes f6, and we see queen taking f6. And now you see that white has gotten their pawn back. We see rook taking d1, rook taking d1. And then we have reached a point in the game where if you do want to stop the video and see what black should play here in this position, it seems like you have a couple of options that you can do in this position. So if you want to stop it and see what you would play here as black, go ahead and do so. All right, cool. So for those of you, like I said, it seems like you have a lot of different options in this position. And more interestingly, I think a lot of people are going to notice that that a pawn is up for grabs here. And there's two different ways to take it. There is queen taking b3, and there is also pawn taking b3, you know, giving you a pass pawn. But unfortunately, if you chose either one of those options, it is like dead loss now. You're about to get mated. So you're thinking like, wait a minute, what? How am I getting mated? Yeah, it's basically checkmate coming up. If you chose either one of those options, it just kind of just depends on how you want to get checkmate. I'm gonna get into that in a minute. But the correct move in this position is actually queen to c5 with check. The thing that you have to be realizing in this position is that you're in such an insane amount of danger as black that you have to protect the position with a queen movement. And that queen movement, like I said, is either queen to c5 with check or queen coming to e5, defending this rook and protecting this king side. Because like I said, you are in a serious amount of danger as black. And so this is exactly why. So if we were to go into the two like horribly wrong answers, if we did take with the queen down here thinking, okay, I got my pawn, I'm doing pretty good, I'm attacking this rook down here, everything seems to be going okay, you would actually be seeing rook to d7, and you are just dead lost as black. You're going to be looking, I mean, there is this pin on this rank, this bishop literally can just be taken for free because of the pin. You also have the ability to check here. And then, you don't want to take back because you're going to be looking at check here and checkmate is coming up. So as you can see, the position is very dire for you now at this point. You're going to be forced to toss a check in, but the king can just hide over here. So he's good. And if we did see pawn, taking b3, you would actually be able to see, let's see, pawn taking b3, you'd actually be able to just take the bishop immediately because you do not want to take this back. Because you're going to be looking at queen to f7 with check, and you are dropping an entire rook in this variation. So what you're going to want to do after knight takes g6 is actually go back and check on b6, and then the king would hide on h2, and after queen to c7, you would actually be able to retreat your knight back to f4, and you have won an entire piece. You're still horribly down, but you're not getting mated immediately. So it's pawn taking b3 and queen taking b3 are not what you want to do. So we did going back to what we saw. We did see queen to c5 with check, and this allows you to get the queen back in a defensive position after king to h2. We see queen to e7. So we're basically nullifying all of the rook to d7s. We're nullifying all of the pawn, the knight taking on g6, because now we're pretty much forced to trade on e7. White is still doing very, very well in this position. So they are still winning, but they're not mating black immediately. So we see rook taking e7, pawn taking c4. And something I want you guys to notice in this position. Now white is up a pawn. So like when you're looking at the position like 5, 6, 7 moves ago, you're like, man, okay, like I'm down a pawn. Now you're up a pawn. So it's just crazy how, you know, everything just ended up being. King comes to g7. We see bishop to h3. We got knight to c5, and then we see rook to d6, just severely activating this rook. We got f6, knight to e6 with check, and so this is forcing a trade. And this is exactly what you want to be doing if you're white, is forcing a trade. Knight takes e6, we got bishop takes e6, and then we have bishop back to e8. And now we see c5. And something that's interesting about the move c5 is it's very, very in-game. Like it has very severe in-game implications. So what I'm going to go ahead and do up in the top right-hand corner, I actually made a video like when I first started YouTube. It was like a beginner video on how like pawns move and stuff like that. It is what I call a pawn freeze. It's just like a deep freeze type of situation that I read in a book. And it is basically when one pawn stops two pawns. So like I said, I'll put that in the upper right-hand corner. If you do want to check out that video, it explains a little bit more in depth as to what exactly c5 is doing to these two pawns. And it's just a little in-game concept that comes up sometimes. So we do see bishop to f7. We got bishop up to c8. We got rook to e5. Bishop takes on b7. We have rook takes on c5. And then we see rook takes on c6. And as you can see, black is down 2 entire pawns. And in an endgame, even in a rook endgame, it's really, really hard to draw that as black, or as the side with less pawns, especially when you have these broken pawns like this. It's a little bit tough. So we got rook to b5, bishop to a6, rook comes down to b2. We see king to g1. So now it kind of looks like the king is cut off. But you'll see Wesley So has a really, really cool way to basically be able to advance his king up the board. It's pretty nice. So the bishop comes back to e8. We see rook to c5, king down to h6. We see king to f1, bishop to d7. And this starts like the really interesting crawl with the white king. So we see bishop down to e2, and bishop to e2 is put in the way to basically allow a block to this rook so that the king can start to make his way up on the dark squares. So we see bishop back to e8. We see king coming up to f2, rook to b3 because we're still trying to cut the king off. But then we see rook over to d5. We see rook to a3, and now we see bishop to d3. So as you can see, this is like a really, really cool looking way that Wesley So has come up with crawling his king up the board, because you know you're not able to move your king up the board past the rook. So he's using his bishop and his rook to basically shield his king, to move his king up into a better position. So it's really, really nice. The king comes to g7. We see king to e3. We got rook to b3, and now basically white is going to use his pawns to shield him from like the rook. So we got rook to b4. Rook comes to c5. We have bishop to f7, rook to c7, pinning the bishop down. We see king to g6, and then we see g4. And it is actually in this position that Fabiano Caruana does resign the game. Basically what you're looking at here is a situation where either this pawn push or this pawn capture is coming, and it's going to be really, really, really hard for you to hold on to the bishop. So if we make just kind of like, let's say we make like a, you know, like a move like rook to d4 or something like that, which doesn't attack anything because you do have king coming to e3. You're really, really going to be forced to take this bishop with this rook, because if you move it away, you're going to be looking at e5 check, and the king is really, really miserable, because either you're going to have to desert your bishop and lose it, or you're going to back up the king to g7, and you're going to be looking at this pawn push, and that's just not where it is. I mean, you know, you can try to throw in like a little spike capture, but you're going to be taken here. And, you know, you're just, I mean, you could be getting mated this way. Like, I mean, there's just all different kinds of stuff that you're going to be looking at. And if we back up and you don't do anything, let's say you don't attack the rook, I mean, you're going to be maybe moving like this, but you're going to be deflecting the king away like this. You know, the king can come up here, but I mean, you're still continuously harassing the king after the king maybe comes back down. I mean, the king literally has no other way now to hold the bishop. So you just, I mean, it's just bad. I mean, so this is all that Fabiano Caruana is calculating. And he's just like, man, I don't even want any of that. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw the towel in, stop the clock. And that's all she wrote. So for all of my people in the Philippines, I'm going to try to get the rest of these good mornings going on. So let me see what I'm looking like. So, maayong buntag, mayad na agahan, Nine bag na bigat, masentos ya kabasan, marhe na aga, buenos dias, maayong aga, mapia na uma, kapian kapunu dios, mayap a abak. It's where it gets tough. It's where it gets tough. I mean, I get a lot to this point. Let me see. Mayad, I think Mayad na aga. Yes. And I have, what is it? Mapia Agay. That's that one. Mapia Agay. And then I have, I think Mapia Kapapita. Yes. Got it. And then there's two other ones that I just really learned recently. Sambal is My Big Bukla. And then I have Suragawanan. I think that's how you say it. Marja na Buntag. So that one's actually not going to be too hard to learn because of my own Buntag. But I appreciate everybody stopping by very much. This was a really, really nice game to show, I believe. And it's nice to see Wesley So get a win in there. And I will be posting the standings. And actually, Wesley So is leading the tournament as we speak right now. So I'll be getting that posted and this video posted in the next 15 to 20. Appreciate you guys very much. Maraming salamat, aking mga kaibigan, paalam, and I will see y'all next time.